fell in soft whispers against the window panes, casting an eerie glow over the room. Detective Jack Larson sat at his cluttered desk, the dim light of the desk lamp highlighting the deep lines etched on his face. He picked up the case file, the bold letters Black Dahlia, glaring back at him. "Why does this case haunt you so much, Jack?" asked Emily, his partner, as she leaned against the doorway. Jack sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's not just the brutality, Emily. It's the mystery. Elizabeth Short, she was, just a girl with dreams." Emily stepped closer, her eyes scanning the scattered photographs and notes. "Do you think we'll ever find out who did it? Sometimes I wonder if the answers are buried too deep," Jack replied, his voice tinged with frustration. The scene shifted to 1947 Los Angeles, a city buzzing with post-war optimism, but shadowed by dark secrets. Elizabeth Short, known as the Black Dahlia, walked along Hollywood Boulevard, her striking beauty turning heads. She dreamed of stardom, of seeing her name in lights. But fate had a different plan. "Why do you always carry that flower, Liz?" asked her friend Jane, referring to the Black Dahlia pinned to Elizabeth's hair. Elizabeth smiled wistfully. "It makes me feel special, like I'm someone important." Little did she know, the flower would become a symbol of one of the most gruesome murders in history. The narrative jumped to a foggy night. Elizabeth standing under a street lamp, her face illuminated by the flickering light. A car pulled up and a shadowy figure stepped out. "Need a ride?" the figure asked, voice smooth and inviting. Elizabeth hesitated but then nodded, her desire for a better life overpowering her instincts. Back in the present, Jack and Emily pored over new evidence. A letter sent to the police taunting them with cryptic clues. "What do you make of this?" Emily asked, her brow furrowed. Jack studied the letter, noting the peculiar handwriting and the odd phrasing. "It's almost like they're playing a game with us." "But why? Why taunt the police?" Emily wondered aloud. Jack leaned back, his eyes distant. "Maybe it's about power, control. They want us to know that they're still out there, that they can strike again." The phone rang. Breaking the silence, Emily answered, her expression growing serious. "Jack, it's the lab. They've found something." As they hurried to the lab, the story wove through various threads of evidence, each piece adding to the complex tapestry of the case. There were flashbacks to Elizabeth's last days, filled with hope and naivety, and glimpses into the lives of potential suspects, each more enigmatic than the last. At the lab, the technician handed them a file. "We found traces of a rare chemical on the victim's clothing. It's only used in specific industrial processes." Jack's mind raced. "That narrows down our suspect list. We need to check all the factories and labs in the area." The tension mounted as they followed this new lead, the sense of urgency palpable. Every turn brought new revelations and deeper mysteries. "What if we're too late?" Emily voiced the fear that gnawed at both of them. "We can't think like that," Jack replied firmly. "We owe it to Elizabeth to keep going, to find the truth." The story continued to unravel, revealing layers of corruption, deceit, and unexpected alliances. Jack and Emily found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew, each clue leading them further down a rabbit hole of intrigue. The atmosphere was thick with suspense, every shadow hiding potential danger, every stranger a possible threat. Yet amidst the darkness, there were moments of light, glimpses of Elizabeth's radiant smile, memories of her laughter, and the indomitable spirit that refused to be forgotten. "Do you think we'll ever find peace, Jack?" Emily asked one evening. As they stood on the rooftop, overlooking the city, Jack stared at the horizon, the city's lights twinkling like stars. "I don't know, Emily, but we have to try for her." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city. Jack and Emily stood in the fading light, determined to follow the new lead. The rare chemical found on Elizabeth's clothing was a crucial clue, one that could finally break the case wide open. "Let's start with the old factory district," Jack suggested, already heading towards the car. Emily nodded, determination etched on her face. "I'll call in backup." just in case. As they drove through the winding streets, the city's neon signs flickered to life, illuminating the darkness with garish colors. The factory district was a stark contrast, its towering structures looming like silent sentinels, remnants of a bygone era. "Here it is," Emily said, pointing to a dilapidated building. "This place has been abandoned for years." Jack parked the car, and they approached the factory with caution. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Inside, their flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing rusted machinery and forgotten relics. "Look over here," Jack called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Emily hurried over her flashlight, revealing a hidden door partially concealed by debris. They pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. "After you," Emily said with a wry smile. Jack led the way, each step creaking ominously beneath their feet. At the bottom, they found a hidden room, filled with strange equipment and stacks of documents. This must be where they processed the chemical, Jack surmised, sifting through the papers. Emily picked up a dusty file, her eyes widening as she read. "Jack, these are records of shipments. This could be the key to finding out where the chemical came from." Just then, a noise echoed from above. They froze, exchanging wary glances. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. Jack nodded, signaling for silence. They listened intently, the tension palpable. Footsteps, someone was above them, moving through the factory. "Stay here," Jack whispered, creeping back up the stairs. Emily waited, her heart pounding. Minutes felt like hours, as she strained to hear any sign of Jack. Suddenly there was a scuffle, followed by a thud. "Jack!" she called out, rushing up the stairs. She found him lying on the ground, a dark figure looming over him. Without hesitation, Emily drew her weapon. "Freeze! Don't move!" The figure turned, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Then, with a swift motion, the figure bolted, disappearing into the shadows. "Jack, are you okay?" Emily asked, kneeling beside him. Jack groaned, rubbing his head. "I'm fine. Did you see where they went?" "Too fast, but we'll get them," Emily said, helping him to his feet. As they regrouped, the sense of urgency intensified. The chase was on, and they were closer than ever to unraveling the mystery of the Black Dahlia. "Let's go," Jack said, determination burning in his eyes. "We can't let them get away." The pursuit led them through the labyrinthine streets of Los Angeles, each twist and turn bringing them closer to the truth. Along the way, they uncovered more clues, each one peeling back another layer of the mystery. Why did they target Elizabeth? Emily pondered aloud during a brief respite. Maybe she knew something, or maybe she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, Jack speculated. Either way, we have to find out. The investigation took them to unexpected places, from high society galas to the seedy underbelly of the city. They encountered a cast of characters, each with their own secrets and motives. Everyone has something to hide, Emily mused after a particularly tense interview with a reluctant witness. "And it's our job to uncover it," Jack replied, his resolve unshakable. As the story continued to unfold, the tension built to a fever pitch. Jack and Emily's relentless pursuit of the truth brought them face to face with danger, a deception, and the darkest corners of the human soul. Yet amidst the shadows, there was always a glimmer of hope, a belief that justice would prevail, that Elizabeth's spirit would find peace. The journey was far from over, and the story, like the city itself, never slept. The night air was cool and crisp as Jack and Emily continued their pursuit. Their car sped through the darkened streets, the city's pulse echoing in the distance. "We need to figure out who that was," Emily said, her voice tinged with urgency. They knew we were onto something. Jack nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "Let's go back to the station. Maybe the records we found will give us a clue." Back at the police station, they pored over the documents they had retrieved from the hidden room in the factory. The records were extensive, detailing shipments and transactions, some dating back years. "Look at this," Emily pointed to a name that appeared frequently in the records. "James Hollis, he was involved In almost every shipment. Jack's eyes narrowed. Let's see what we can find out about him. Hours of digging through archives and databases revealed that James Hollis was a reclusive chemist with ties to several prominent industrialists in Los Angeles. His background was murky, with gaps and inconsistencies that raised more questions than answers. He's our guy, Jack said, leaning back in his chair. We need to find him. Their search led them to an old mansion on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling estate that had seen better days. The gates were rusted, and the garden was overgrown, but the house itself still exudes an air of faded grandeur. This place gives me the creeps, Emily muttered, as they approached the front door. Jack knocked, the sound echoing ominously. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with sharp, piercing eyes. Can I help you? He asked, his voice gravelly. Mr. Hollis? Jack inquired. The man's eyes flickered with recognition. Who wants to know? We're with the LAPD, Emily said, showing her badge. We have some questions about your involvement with the Black Dahlia case. Hollis's face hardened. I have nothing to say to you. Jack stepped forward. This isn't going away, Mr. Hollis. We know you were involved. We just want to hear your side of the story. For a moment, it seemed like Hollis might slam the door in their faces, but then he sighed, stepping aside to let them in. The inside of the mansion was a stark contrast to the outside, clean, orderly, and meticulously maintained. I suppose you won't leave until you get what you came for, Hollis said, leading them to a dimly lit study. We know about the chemical found on Elizabeth Short's clothing, Emily began, and we know you had access to it. Hollis sat down heavily, his eyes distant. I was young and foolish. I got involved with the wrong people, but I didn't kill her. Who did? Jack pressed. Hollis shook his head. I don't know, but I can tell you this. The people who orchestrated this were powerful. Connected, they could make anyone disappear. The room fell silent, the weight of Hollis's words sinking in. Jack and Emily exchanged a glance, realizing the magnitude of the forces they were up against. Do you have any evidence? Emily asked, her voice softening. Hollis reached into a drawer and pulled out a faded photograph. This is the only proof I have. It's a picture of Elizabeth with some very influential people who would do anything to keep their secrets hidden. Jack took the photograph, studying the faces. Thank you, Mr. Hollis. This could be the breakthrough we need. As they left the mansion, the gravity of their discovery settled in. The case was far from over, but they were closer than ever to uncovering the truth. We need to be careful, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. If Hollis is right, we're dealing with dangerous people. Jack nodded, his resolve unwavering. We'll find them, Emily, no matter what it takes. The night was growing darker, the city's lights twinkling in the distance like distant stars. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but Jack and Emily knew they couldn't stop now. The truth was within their grasp, and they were determined to see justice served. The next morning, Jack and Emily met with Captain Reynolds, the head of their precinct. They laid out the new evidence and their findings about James Hollis. This photograph could be the key, Jack said, placing the picture on Reynolds' desk. We need to identify everyone in it. Reynolds studied the photograph, his expression grim. You realize this could open a can of worms, right? These are powerful people. We know, Emily replied, but we can't back down now. Reynolds nodded. I'll get our best analysts on it. In the meantime, you two stay on Hollis. He might know more than he's letting on. Jack and Emily left the office, their minds racing with the implications of their discovery. They headed back to Hollis's mansion, determined to get more information. When they arrived, they found the front door ajar. Jack drew his weapon, motioning for Emily to stay behind him. They entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the silent house. Hollis? Jack called out, his voice tense. No response. They moved through the mansion, room by room, until they reached the study. Hollis lay on the floor, unconscious but alive, a small trickle of blood running from a wound on his head. Call for an ambulance, Jack instructed Emily as he checked Hollis's pulse. Emily dialed quickly, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of what had happened. We need to figure out who did this. Jack nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. Someone wanted to shut him up. They might still be here. They moved through the house, searching for any clues. In the basement, they found a set of muddy footprints leading to a small window. They must have escaped through here, Emily said, examining the footprints. Jack's phone buzzed. It was Captain Reynolds. We've identified one of the people in the photograph. It's Charles Denning, a prominent businessman with ties to organized crime. That explains a lot, Jack said, relaying the information to Emily. We need to dig deeper into Denning's connections. As they waited for the ambulance, they continued to search the house. In a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf, they found a collection of old letters and documents, all tied to the same group of influential figures. This is a gold mine, Emily said, carefully packing the documents into evidence bags. We need to get these back to the station. The ambulance arrived, and Hollis was taken to the hospital under police guard. Jack and Emily returned to the station, their evidence now a growing mountain of connections and secrets. Denning's got to be the key, Jack said as they reviewed the documents. If we can tie him to the murder, the whole house of cards will come down. The days that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, surveillance, and painstaking analysis. Each new piece of information brought them closer to the heart of the conspiracy. One evening, as they sat in the dim light of the office, Emily looked at Jack, her eyes tired but determined. Do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of this? Jack nodded slowly. We have to for Elizabeth, and for everyone else who suffered because of these people. A sudden breakthrough came when they intercepted a phone call between Denning and an unknown associate. The conversation was cryptic, but hinted at a meeting at a secluded location outside the city. This could be it, Emily said, adrenaline coursing through her veins. We need to be ready. The night of the meeting, Jack and Emily staked out the location, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. They watched as expensive cars pulled up, their occupants slipping inside, under the cover of darkness. We can't let them slip away, Jack whispered, signaling for backup. As the police closed in, Jack and Emily moved to the warehouse entrance. Inside, they found Denning and his associates, deep in conversation. The sight of armed officers caught them off guard. Freeze, lay PD. Jack shouted, his weapon drawn. Denning's face twisted in anger. You have no idea what you're getting into, he sneered. We know enough, Emily retorted. You're under arrest. The bust was swift and efficient. As Denning and his associates were led away in handcuffs, Jack and Emily felt a sense of accomplishment. But they knew the fight wasn't over. Back at the station, they continued to unravel the web of corruption, each thread leading to more revelations and deeper conspiracies. We've taken a big step, Jack said, looking at the board covered in photos and notes. But there's still a lot we don't know, Emily nodded. We'll get there, Jack, one piece at a time. The journey was far from over, but the path was clearer now. Jack and Emily's determination burned brighter than ever, fueled by a relentless drive for justice. The following day, the station buzzed with the fallout from the Denning bust. Media outlets swarmed, eager for details on the high-profile arrests. Jack and Emily were hailed as heroes, but they knew their work was far from finished. Nice work, Captain Reynolds said, clapping Jack on the shoulder. But we need to stay vigilant. There are still plenty of unanswered questions. Agreed, Jack replied, glancing at the board filled with clues and photos. We need to keep digging into Denning's connections. Emily sifted through the documents they had retrieved from Hollis's mansion. There's mention of a secret meeting place used by Denning and his associates. If we find it, we might uncover more evidence. Their investigation led them to an old speakeasy hidden beneath a seemingly abandoned bar. The place was a relic of the Prohibition era, with dusty bottles lining the shelves and faded posters on the walls. It had been repurposed as a clandestine meeting spot for Los Angeles' elite criminals. Look at this, Emily said, pointing to a hidden door behind the bar. This must be the entrance. They pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase, leading down to a dimly lit room. Inside, they found a treasure trove of documents, photographs and ledgers, all detailing the operations of a powerful criminal syndicate. "This is it," Jack said, his voice filled with awe. "This is the evidence we need." As they combed through the files, they discovered connections to numerous unsolved crimes, all linked back to Denning and his associates. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, involving politicians, business leaders, and even some law enforcement officers. "We're going to need a lot of backup," Emily said, her eyes wide with realization. Jack nodded. "Let's get this to the captain. We can't let any of this fall through the cracks." Back at the station, they presented their findings to Captain Reynolds. He was visibly shaken by the extent of the corruption, but determined to see justice served. "We'll launch a full-scale investigation," Reynolds said. "This is going to be big, and it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but we have to see it through." The task force was assembled, and the crackdown began. Over the next few weeks, high-profile arrests were made, and the media frenzy intensified. Amidst the chaos, Jack and Emily remained focused on their ultimate goal, solving the murder of Elizabeth Short. Each new piece of evidence brought them closer to the truth, and their resolve never wavered. One night, as they sifted through a particularly revealing set of documents, Emily paused, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Jack, look at this," she said, holding up a photograph of a young Elizabeth Short with a man they hadn't identified before. "Who is this, and why is he in so many of these photos?" Jack examined the picture. "He looks familiar. Maybe he's one of the key players we've been missing." Their search for the mysterious man led them to an old apartment building in a rundown part of the city. The man, identified as Richard Harlan, was a small-time actor with connections to some of the most powerful figures in Los Angeles. When they arrived at his apartment, they found it abandoned, but the walls were covered in photographs and newspaper clippings about Elizabeth Short and the Black Dahlia case. "He was obsessed with her," Emily said, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and anger. "But why?" As they pieced together Harlan's history, they discovered he had been a close friend of Elizabeth's, possibly even a lover. His obsession had grown over time, turning into something dark and dangerous. "We need to find him," Jack said, a sense of urgency in his voice. He might hold the key to the entire case. Their hunt for Richard Harlan led them through the underbelly of Los Angeles, from seedy motels to forgotten alleyways. Each step brought them closer to a confrontation that could finally reveal the truth about Elizabeth Short's murder. The city was alive with tension, the stakes higher than ever. Jack and Emily knew they were on the brink of a breakthrough, but danger lurked around every corner. Would they find Richard Harlan in time? Would his revelations finally bring justice for Elizabeth Short? The story, like the city, continued to pulse with life, each twist and turn drawing them deeper into its enigmatic heart. Jack and Emily's pursuit of Richard Harlan intensified as they uncovered more about his obsession with Elizabeth Short. They traced his movements through old contacts and informants, following a trail that led them to an abandoned theater on the outskirts of the city. The theater stood like a forgotten relic, its marquee faded and windows boarded up. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the musty scent of decay. Jack and Emily moved cautiously through the darkened corridors, their flashlights casting long shadows on the cracked walls. "He must be here somewhere," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Suddenly, a soft shuffling sound broke the stillness of the stage, capturing their full attention. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, they cautiously made their way forward, their hearts pounding in anticipation. As they reached the edge of the stage, their eyes fell upon him, Richard Harlan, standing alone in the spotlight, his eyes haunted, filled with pain. Without hesitation, Jack called out to Richard, his voice steady and assertive. "Richard, we need to talk." Richard turned slowly, his gaze locking onto Jack and Emily. His voice trembled. As he spoke, "You shouldn't have come here." Emily, with empathy in her voice, urged Richard to share what he knew. "Richard, we need to know what you know. Please, you can trust us." Richard looked down, his hands shaking with a mix of grief and regret. "I loved her, you know. Elizabeth. I would never hurt her." Confusion filled Jack's voice as he gestured to the walls, adorned with photographs and newspaper clippings. "Then why all of this? Why the obsession?" With a hard swallow, Richard answered, his voice cracking with raw emotion. "I wanted to find out who did it, who took her from me." Jack and Emily exchanged a glance, suddenly understanding the depth of Richard's pain and relentless pursuit for justice. "Richard," Emily spoke gently, "if you know something, anything that can help us, now's the time to tell us." Richard hesitated, torn between fear and the desire for resolution. Finally, he nodded slowly. "There was a man, a powerful man. He was always around, always watching Elizabeth. I thought he was just another fan, but now I'm not so sure." Jack's voice grew urgent as he pressed for more details. "Who was he, Richard? What was his name?" Richard closed his eyes, struggling to recall. "His name? It was something with a B. Benson? No, Barnes, that's it. He was always with her at parties, events. Everywhere the pieces began falling into place for Jack. And Emily. Barnes, Jack repeated, a glimmer of recognition in his eyes. "We've heard that name before." Expressing their gratitude to Richard, they called for backup to escort him safely to the station. As they exited the theater, Jack's mind raced with the possibilities. Barnes was a missing link, a connection to the powerful figures involved in the conspiracy. Back at the station, Jack and Emily painstakingly studied their notes and evidence, weaving together the final strands of their investigation. Barnes's involvement tied everything together: the chemical, the cover-ups, and Elizabeth Short's tragic fate. Determination rang in Emily's voice. "We need to find Barnes. He's the last piece of this puzzle." Jack nodded, his face etched with resolve. "No matter where he hides, we'll track him down." Days turned into weeks as they relentlessly pursued Barnes across the city and beyond, following every lead that brought them closer to the elusive figure at the center of the web, until finally the moment arrived. They cornered Barnes in a lavish penthouse with a breathtaking view of the skyline. "Barnes," Jack addressed him, his voice filled with steely determination. "It's over." Barnes turned with a knowing smirk on his lips. "Is it now? You have nothing on me." In response, Jack held up a folder, its contents containing incriminating evidence. "We have everything we need, Barnes. Your connections, your dealings, it's all here." With that, the story came full circle, as clarity and justice prevailed. Barnes's facade cracked, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "You can't prove anything." "We can and we will," Emily said, stepping forward. "For Elizabeth Short and all the others you've harmed." Barnes's defiance melted into resignation as he realized the game was up. He was arrested, his empire crumbling around him. In the aftermath, the city breathed a sigh of relief. Justice had been served, and the truth about Elizabeth Short's murder had finally come to light. Jack and Emily stood together, their journey through darkness ending in triumph. But as they looked out over the city, they knew their work was far from over. The story of the Black Dahlia would live on in infamy, a reminder of the power of persistence and the pursuit of justice. Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the past and delve into the hidden horrors that shape our history. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales and investigations into the darkest secrets. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the shadows.